There are hundreds of writers' centers around the country, but the Cape Cod Writers Center is unique. Why do I say that? Well, we happen to be on the verge of our 60th anniversary. People go to writers' conferences for lots of reasons. Of course, the most important is to hear from famous or prominent writer instructors who can talk about and teach you all kinds of things about writer's craft and history of it and promotion and all of that. Very important for us to hear that, since a lot of us begin writing by ourselves. That's another reason to go to a writers' conference, because writing is a solitary endeavor, and it's really important to be with other people and have feedback. And of course, the third one related to that is networking. And when you do network with other writers, you don't feel so alone, and often you pick up new tips and new information. So with that said, I have to tell you why the Cape Cod Writers Center 60th conference is unique. We are one of the oldest in the country. We began in 1963 when a group of writers called the 12 O'Clock Scholars, they were dreaming about having a summer conference with some of the famous authors who came to the Cape. And in August of that year, it became a reality. And the first person they had as a speaker was Kurt Vonnegut. This was actually, he was already famous, but he became much more so when he wrote Slaughterhouse-Five several years later. Anyway, the conference was a hit from the start. And it was held at a charming place called the Craigville Conference Center, which was a sort of a gingerbread summer community on a bluff over the Craigville beach. By the 1970s, middle 1970s, the founder, Marion Vulliamy, had incorporated it into the Cape Cod Writers Center Conference, Inc. And of course, by then, there were other related activities, many of which are still going on today. For instance, there is a Books in the World television cable TV program. It's actually the oldest in the country. It's an author interview program. There was a Young Writers program. We still have that for teenagers. There were public readings that we did. There were seminars. We still have the seminars are called Pathways to Publication. That said, let's talk about today. I just have to tell you that over the years, Mrs. Vulliamy, the founder, had an incredible group of prominent authors who appeared besides Kurt Vonnegut. Among them, I'm just going to name a few. There was Edward Gorey, Dawn Ellis, Mary Higgins Clark, Marge Piercy, Dennis Lehane, and of course, more recently, we've had others such as Lisa Genova, Andre Dubout, Margaret Mega Wolitzer, Colin McCann, Malachi McCourt, William Martin, and B.A. Shapiro. So this gives you a flavor for what we're offering this year. We have an outstanding group of faculty. We have Verlin Klinkenborg, who was on the editorial board of the New York Times, who's our keynote speaker. We have classes in craft, fiction, nonfiction, screenwriting, poetry, memoir, promotion, publicity. All of that is offered if you come to the conference. So and the dates are August 3 through 6. We used to be at the Craigville Conference Center, but in 2013, we moved to a great hotel in Hyannis, the Resort and Conference Center at Hyannis. There's air conditioning, easy access for parking, easy access for internet. Of course, there's also some swimming pools. We're downtown in Hyannis. We're right near the ferries and all of that to go to the islands and the beaches. So yeah, we hope you come. Should be a great conference.
So to understand what the Cape Cod Writers Center means to me and what the conference has meant to me, I got to give you a little background here. I started writing when I was 16 years old and wrote into my late 20s, wallpapering my wall with 25 to 50 rejection letters. And then I started raising a family and started getting involved in a career. Fast forward 30 years, and I now had the time, my kids were grown, and I decided to start writing again. Interestingly enough, I hadn't met another writer in 30 years since I was in college. Then I discovered the Cape Cod Writers Center. I went to my first conference, and it was like, wow, there's 150 people here who all have the same dream. Some of them are poets, some of them are memoirists, nonfiction, fiction. Very few had been published, but some. And I was kind of a 60-year-old wide-eyed kid. I got to submit my first 5 pages to an agent who told me, thanks, but no thanks, but keep trying because you have some talent. And I met a bunch of fellow writers. And the benefit of the conference and subsequent meetings with the Writers Center could be categorized as the workshops, the instructors, the instruction on how to write, how to market your book, how to get published, plus the general hope of someday getting published. But far and away, the single biggest benefit was the camaraderie and moral support of the fellow writers. I didn't know about writers groups, and I discovered at the conference a writers group that met in a little old colonial church in Falmouth, and I joined it. We called ourselves the Steeple Scholars. There were 6 of us to start, and at the time I joined, none of us had been published. And one of the greatest obstacles of writing, I think, is the belief that you can be published. And lo and behold, one after another, several of us got published. And that group, what used to be the Steeple Scholars, has now published over 20 books. And here I am, 6 books published, and I'm working on my 7th novel. So it was, I have to honestly say, I'm not sure I would have been able to break through that mental, emotional barrier without the support of the Writers Center.
The conference, I first went there in August of 2005, never had written fiction before, other than my own self-appraisal. And you know, you're always a little shy, you're wondering, is this correct? Am I imposing myself on something that, you know, is not right? And I found that the people there, the instructors were very nurturing. I found the community there was very helpful, and it gave me I also ended up getting hooked up with a writing group, and it really made a difference for me to go from not having ever written fiction, and my 13th published novel will arrive in August. So I mean, and I give a lot of credit to that and to the writers group that I had afterward. I went to the first class there. It was with Joanne Ferguson, who, as you know, has published over 100 books. And it was really odd because it was on romance. I'm thinking, oh man, you know, I expected a lady with a, you know, big hat and all this kind of stuff. And instead, it was this former Army captain who was wonderful and just said, no nonsense here. And she went and really inspired me. And she has been a friend and advocate for me ever since then. And the other person who's been very helpful to me that I met at the Cape Cod Writers Center was Carol Bouget, or C.E. Lawrence, as ever you want to call her, who is now nominated for an Edgar, who has a play on Off-Broadway, who has been at the Kennedy Center, has been a continuing friend, helpful, and mentor to me since then, too. My point is that if somebody is a little tentative, is wanting to be, you know, to determine, can I write? Because that's always your question, you know, am I worthy of this? Can I write? That's a great place to start, because you will meet others like you. There usually is an awful lot of camaraderie and a lot of things that you can go back out of that feeling very inspired and nurturing and getting more, I think, instilling confidence in yourself. Isn't that what we all need? Exactly. So I have been to most of the conferences since then, the in-person ones. I like them in person, but I'll tell you, I think anyone who attends, and people come from all over the country, you find that there are things to learn. Even though I've had a lot of books published since then, and they're all traditionally published, may I add, I still learn something if I go to a class. And I think when you stop learning, you should stop writing.
Well, I go way back in the life of the Cape Cod Writers Center, all the way back to Books in the World with the immortal Marion Villamere, probably with my first book, which was Back Bay. And every book since, I have come to the Cape Cod Writers Center and appeared on Books and the World. And I have had the opportunity to speak to the audience at the Cape Cod Writers Center as a keynote speaker once, and missed once also. That was in 1991, when I was all set to be the keynote speaker after Cape Cod my fourth novel came out and was a New York Times bestseller, and everybody was reading it. And I traveled home from a trip to the West to make sure that I would be there on Cape Cod for that particular special event, because it meant a lot to me to speak to that group on that wonderful old campus where you used to be down there in Hyannis. And then Hurricane Bob came along and knocked out all the power on Cape Cod. And I never got to give that speech at the Cape Cod Writers Center. However, there have been many pleasant interactions with that group. And I say that because as a writer, no matter where you are on the spectrum of professional achievement or success or whatever you want to call it, every writer likes to be in a place where they know that they are among people who respect what it is that they do, who respect the art of storytelling, the art of research, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and who hold every writer up to a certain level of high standard that is simply a motivation for every writer to keep writing and to keep getting better. And that's what I have always sensed when I've been in the presence of people from the Cape Cod Writers Center. That's why I think it's a fantastic place, and why I look forward to another 60 years of success with the Cape Cod Writers Center. And another keynote speech, perhaps, some summer in the near future.
I've been attending the Cape Cod Writers Center conference probably since the late 1990s. Sometime in early, maybe 2000, 2001, Marion Villemere, who was the director of the conference, she had a talk with a bunch of us about something called print on demand. And I was part of a writing group, and I thought, well, that would be spectacular if those of us in this writing group were able to put our poems and our short stories and our plays into a book and publish it, since at that point, none of us thought we would ever get published. So I did that. The first one was called Summer Home Review, and that was published in 2002. And in 2005, I published another one, Summer Home Review 2. And lots of Cape Cod poets and short story writers were in that book. Paula Nelson, Candace Perry, a poet, and playwright. And I attended for years after that. In the beginning, I primarily writing poetry. And then one year, I attended a screenwriting class by Lois Demko. And it's like a light bulb went off. And I was like, I can take all of the things that I've learned about poetry and turn it into dialogue. At conference one year, a woman came up to me named Bunny Wingate, and she said that she had a story that she thought would make a great screenplay. And so after conference, we got together and we put together the story, and that was the first screenplay I wrote. So conferences has over the years just been amazing. I've met wonderful poets, wonderful writers, people who wanted to share what they knew and where they had gotten with their work with people from their classes. I think whether it's the networking that happens, whether it's the friendships, whether it's the learning, the education you get, or whether it's being a part of an amazing group of inclusive writers, I think that that's probably what conferences meant to me.
I had started writing after I left my longtime business career, and I really enjoyed and loved writing, but I discovered very, very quickly I didn't know anything about it. First of all, I had to go back and re-educate myself. What I really needed to do was find out exactly what goes into writing a novel. Things like voice, point of view, setting, plot, character, all those things that are important, but that I really had never thought about in individual components. So I ended up, I think 2004, talked to a nice lady named Jacqueline Loring on the phone. She said, come down to the Cape. I went to my first writers conference and I fell in love with the writers conference. I fell in love with the Writers Center. And I will also tell you, I fell in love with a lot of the instructors and the people that I met. And those relationships went on to become an important part as I moved forward in the public trying to get published. It was very, very important. I met a woman that very first year who had become a very close writing friend of mine, who became what we referred to as writing partners. I ended up met several instructors and even talked to an agent. I had no idea who agents were or what they did, but I discovered that as well. Every year I went to the conference. I loved the conference. I would get to speak at the conference and get meet an awful lot of people. Those people many of them became my best writing friends. And I would have to say that if it wasn't for them, I would not have got published. I did find a publishing contract after submitting for numerous publishers, editors, and agents. Back in 2011, as I said, I signed to a contract with a small New York publisher named Wild Rose Press, who came very highly recommended. I ended up publishing my first novel, ended up being recommended for a national award. I ended up publishing 4 other novels through the Wild Rose Press over the next 10 years. It's been a very, very successful experience. I have again adored going to the conference, all the people I've met, including people like are currently now on the board, and Nancy Rubin Stuart, executive director.
Well, I was involved with the Cape Cod Writers Center when I first started writing. I was actually a member of the board, which was a lovely group of people who worked very hard and were very committed to the center. I didn't actually ever participate in one of the summer programs. I was able to get my agent through the center because a friend of mine did get an agent and did get a book published after she attended one of the summer conferences. And so when I asked her, I had been working on a manuscript, and when I asked her, how you got published, she said, "Oh, this is my agent," and gave me the name of the agent at Jane Rotrosen, which is a wonderful agency in New York City. And so she told me what to do. And I did it. I typed up 3 chapters of my manuscript and I sent them off to the agency. And lo and behold, one day the phone rang and I got a call from Meg Ruley, who was a Nantucket girl. I was on Cape Cod. She was a Nantucket girl. She was working in New York. She was just starting out as an agent, and she was building what she called the Cape Cod Mafia, a group of writers on Cape Cod who were mostly interested in crime and suspense fiction. And so that's how I first got published. And now I have to say, it was a wonderful experience. I've had a few ups and downs, but I've now finished. I'm up in the 30s. I have at least 30 published books. This is my latest one, which has just gotten a shout out from Colleen Hoover, which has made everybody at my agency and everyone is very excited about that. So I just have to say, I really, in a sort of a strange way, owe everything in my writing career to the Cape Cod Writers Center. And I know the programs in the summer are wonderful. I always wished I could go, but maybe now they'll ask me to teach.
It's a great opportunity to speak on behalf of the Cape Cod Writers Center, because over the years, it's helped me and meant a lot to me. For example, the book I selected for a cover here is called Lift, The Rise of MLM. It's my first science fiction novel. I've been working on it off and on for about 8 or 9 years. And I've been thinking about it most of my adult life. Well, what happened was I really got a good review and a healthy start on things when a few years ago, the Cape Cod Writers Center, I took some classes with Jeffrey Carver, a science fiction writer. And Cape Cod Writers is the only place I've ever been to where they've had a science fiction writer in the mix of people you could speak with. So I jumped right on it. And I've since read his books. He gave me some valuable insight. He helped others as well. So this book is coming out next year. And I'm so happy because I've worked so hard on it. And even at the Cape Cod Writers Center meetings after the conference, I would talk about the book and I was asked to present it, and I did. The very first conference I went to, and we're talking now about 10 or 12 years ago, I met Gary Bravo, who is also a science fiction thriller writer, and he's become a good friend. He's given me blurbs on my books. He will give me a blurb on this new one called Lift, and I've also given him a blurb on his books. So he's been a wonderful friend and a big support to me in my work. So I'm very happy to speak on behalf of the Cape Cod Writers Center, and I thank Nancy and everybody again for this opportunity.